Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Pleased to welcome for the first time to the program Oren Cass. He is the chief economist at American Compass and an all-around smart guy. We share some friends in common, and Oren, good to have you. I want to talk about trade and tariffs with you. And Oren, would you tell people what your background is so that they know you've got the chops to talk tariffs and trade?
Gosh, I don't know if anyone has the chops to talk about that these days. Let's see, I was a business consultant for a while. Went to law school. Was Mitt Romney's domestic policy director. Been a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and founded an organization called American Compass in 2020.
Well, the reason I got a hold of you is because we have some friends in common, and I wrote something about trade and tariffs today for Fox News saying I was a Reaganite skeptic, Friedman, Chicago School, the whole nine yards. But $300 billion in the first year, the EU deal, the $27 billion in June, more in July. I'm beginning to think of trade and tariffs as a tax on the world to help us keep the freedom of navigation. How do you view the Trump trade and tariff policy this way?
Well, I guess I would argue that the most important element of any trade and tariffs discussion is to just start with the question of whether or not making things matters. I think a lot of what we got wrong in recent decades, a lot of what a lot of economists still argue is that making things doesn't matter. We don't care about manufacturing, and therefore it wouldn't make any sense to have policies that try to protect manufacturing or bring back manufacturing. And I think if you do care about those things, then you do have to start thinking about tariffs. And what you just highlighted, the fact that it does generate a lot of revenue, the fact that the U.S. is in a very strong position compared to these other countries, it speaks to the fact that it can work. That the economic models that just assume, this is going to be a disaster, they haven't held up because the U.S. has a unique position. Obviously, Donald Trump recognized that and understood that in a way an awful lot of commentators and experts did not. And we're starting to see that there's actually a lot of upside here that America had never considered before.
So, Oren, I had Noah Rothman on yesterday, another old Reaganite, even though he's young, saying, well, the price of toys and everything we don't make in this country is going to cost more. And I pointed out AstraZeneca is reshoring a $50 billion pharmaceutical company, and we don't want to outsource ships. And China is now the world's leading supplier of maritime ships. We've got to rebuild our shipbuilding industry. So it's not really a neutral thing when it's things like pharmaceuticals and ships. And it's okay if we end up paying a little bit more for toys. We have substitutions for those, don't we? We can always make a choice.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think first of all, it's important to look at, what are the actual price effects here. I think during the Biden administration, especially, people got used to these kind of crazy price increases, out of control inflation. And what we're seeing is that's not what tariffs do at all. Tariffs do make some things more expensive. I think it's important to be honest about that. I don't see there's no reason to hide that because life is about trade-offs. And you just put it exactly right that there's a reason to do this. We tried making one trade-off. We said all we're going to care about is cheap stuff. And we saw what we lost. And we realized that that what we lost was a lot more than what we gained. So changing that trade-off, saying that, look, some things certainly in the short run might be a little bit more expensive, but we're going to get better at making those things too. I think we'll find that over time we can be competitive making anything, and we're going to bring back manufacturing. We're going to revitalize communities. We're going to strengthen national security. We're going to create good jobs. We're going to boost growth and investment and innovation. It's all the same thing any old school Reaganite should care about. And by the way, Reagan himself cared about it. I mean, Reagan took all sorts of protectionist actions against Japan in particular. The Cato Institute called him the worst protectionist since Herbert Hoover. And I think it's really after Reagan that some folks on the right of center fell into, what I would call a market fundamentalism, just free trade always, no matter what. Cheap stuff is the point of life and the point of the economy. And I think we should be very glad that conservatives are starting to remember why we're conservatives in a sense.
Well, now let's probe in that. When did you, if you converted from free trade always and everywhere, NAFTA is good, GATT was great, WTO was better, except China was cheating. When did you begin to convert? We have 1 minute, then I'll come back and explore it. Did you have a conversion?
I did a little bit. I think, I took economics classes in college and learned the right answer to put on the exams. The first time I was really forced to think about it was when I was working for Mitt Romney. People forget that on China, he was Donald Trump before Donald Trump was Donald Trump. And Romney specifically said, "What are we going to do about China?" and sent me off to try to figure it out. And that's where I started learning about this.
I'll be right back with Oren Cass because we also have to ask about the president's legal authority to do what he is doing because he's a Harvard law guy. I'm a Michigan law guy. I teach con law. I still have my worries. I want to find out what Oren Cass has to say. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm with Oren Cass, who is the chief economist at American Compass. And I want to stress he was part of the brain trust that Mitt Romney put together. If he and Lonnie Chen had been running things on the domestic policy side, we'd be a lot better off right now. But you're a lawyer, Oren, and I went through the powers that have been delegated to the president. Congress was given the authority over tariffs in the Constitution, but they passed the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, Section 201 and 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, and then the big banana, International Emergency Economic Powers, i.e., EPA, of 1977. Do you think Donald Trump has the authority to do what he's doing?
I think the authority question is actually a very close one. I think the best analysis I've seen is one of my old professors, Jack Goldsmith, who's
Oh, sure.
specializes especially in foreign affairs law. I think he made the really important point that if you were to assess this as just sort of an economic policy question, it's at the very outer reaches of what you might expect a president to be able to do, what you might expect Congress to be able to delegate to the president. If you see it to a significant extent as a foreign affairs power, and you see the way that Trump is using it in negotiations with foreign countries, I think it's pretty fair to say, look, you could not do this through legislation. If you want to be able to use tariffs to negotiate, then the president does have to use this power, just as he might use, sanctions or military power or anything else. So I would suspect the court is likely to at least kind of find a middle ground or uphold a lot of what the administration has done. That being said, if you want tariffs to work, if you want them to have their economic effect, at the end of the day, you need them to be permanent. You need people to believe this is what's going to be in place for the long run. And so something we push for very strongly at American Compass, and I think is very important, is we do need legislation on this. If we want to have a global minimum tariff, we need to legislate it. We need Congress to get behind it. It should be something that Democrats and Republicans can both be supportive of, and I think that would certainly put it on firmer ground and also allow it to have much better economic effects by shaping investment.
That, I like that. I would love to see not a delegation of authority, but an actual express minimum tariff. But Oren, I want to go back to where I opened. I'm a national security conservative first, and so all of this international trade regime, WTO, they depend upon freedom of navigation. China is challenging that in a very aggressive way, not just in the South China Sea, but across the globe. I view the tariffs as the world's contribution to our patrolling the seas, both underwater and on top, to make sure that this shirt, which comes from wherever, costs a penny because the cost of shipping is so low. Do you think that will be persuasive to the court that freedom of the seas is a commander-in-chief issue?
I think freedom of the seas is certainly a commander-in-chief issue. I think it's a little bit hard to identify the nexus that's how you would use the tariff power, given that that's certainly not the basis that the legislation contemplates for an emergency and the tariff power. So I would just analyze them as two separate issues. I think with respect to the legal authority, the question is Trump using this in a way to advance legitimate interests that are within the Article 2 power, that are within the way certainly we've historically seen executives conduct foreign affairs, and that will be very important to the analysis. I do think your point about freedom of navigation is a very important one, and it's been very important to see the way the administration, especially Stephen Miran, who chairs the Council of Economic Advisors, has paired these two things together. He said the trade issues and the security issues are inseparable. We have a problem with the way that the trading system is working. We also have a problem with the way global security is working and the way that so much of the world has been a free rider on U.S. spending, on U.S. guarantees. And so I think we should think of these things together. What the president is doing, what is very much needed is moving beyond this kind of post-Cold War hegemony that we thought we could exercise and moving to a world where we want to have strong alliances, we want to have strong allies, but it has to be on a fair basis. It has to be with balanced trade. It has to be with everybody doing their fair share to take care of their own security.
Final question, Oren, do you sense there is a change in between the 40s of the Republican Party? I don't know what the Democrats think except to fund the police and genes are racist. They've lost their mind. But between the 40s of the Republican Party, do you think the consensus is changing on trade and tariffs?
Oh, I think it is completely changed. I mean, I think the ball has been moved out from between the 40s well into the red zone. And I think you see that, both within the base of Republican voters and attitudes among conservatives and then certainly with elected officials as well. I think China is the kind of entry point for all of this. 10 years ago when Mitt Romney said, well, I guess 15 years ago now, trade with China is not working, the Wall Street Journal lost its mind. It was outrageous that you would question the wisdom of free trade with this authoritarian, communist, state controlled economy. Now everybody accepts that that just doesn't work. And I think the question is once you realize, well, free trade doesn't automatically work, where are the places where it's not working? And we actually see there are a lot of problems with our relationships with the EU, with Japan and Korea. And so I think everybody, certainly, including myself, we want to have actual free trade. We want to have a big free trading zone with great allies, with free markets. But that doesn't just mean open markets, close your eyes, don't worry about what happens. It means there actually have to be rules, and it means that everybody has to follow the rules, and there have to be consequences if you don't.
And we have to pay attention. Japan was not taking our rice. The United Kingdom and Europe was not taking our beef. There are more non-tariff trade barriers than I had any idea. Were you aware of them? I mean, is this all news to you as well?
No, it's something that we looked at for a while. That the whole premise of the WTO system was, well, let's just get the tariffs down and then everyone will be happy. And what a lot of very smart countries did was they said, okay, great, look, our tariffs are down, but here are all these other things we can do, both to close off our markets and then also to subsidize our producers and give them an advantage in your market. And so the United States was sort of quite naively going around with both hands tied behind its back. And we thought that that was our role. We thought that we were sort of supposed to be taking care of the whole world and accepting this from everybody else and just saying thank you for the cheap stuff. And instead, now what we're realizing is no, if you want trade to work, especially if you want to be good for American workers, then it's about a lot more than tariffs. And the president is using tariffs to try and force changes on all those fronts.
Oren Cass of American Compass, thank you. Great to have you on the program. I hope you will come back. American Compass is a great organization. You go look it up and look up Oren as well. Thank you much. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned to The Hugh Hewitt Show.